Do you think the coming famine will change that?
Absolutely. I would argue that when the famine comes, I think all these feminists will look for a strong man of resource who is.
That was a sliver from a 2.5-hour long interview between Tucker Carlson and Andrew Tate. I'm going to let you hear the 30 seconds of lead up in that conversation to the point where they reference the coming famine, and you'll see that they're just talking about pronouns, feminism, the liberal culture, and its effects on our society, and then Tucker comes out of left field, so casual and nonchalant, referencing the coming famine as if it's just taken for granted, as if it's common knowledge, without any specificity or clarification or explanation about what coming famine are you talking about. He blurts it out and lets it roll off the tip of his tongue like a throwaway sidebar statement, and then they move along.
Starbucks employee, it's actually Z, correct. You are a moron, and you are just wasting so much energy. You could put that towards something beneficial. You could volunteer. You could go to the gym. There's so much more you could do with instead of walking around and talking about Z. You sound like a dumbass. But they're just finding struggle because they don't have any actual important struggle in their lives. And that's why it only exists in the decadent West.
Do you think the coming famine will change that?
Absolutely. I would argue that when the famine comes, I think all these feminists will look for a strong man of resource who is stoic, who...
This is the Economist magazine cover from May of 2022. The Economist magazine is infamous for predicting the future, but it's typically with symbolism and images that can only be decoded in the aftermath, where you can look back in hindsight after the events play out and realize that the Economist magazine predicted the future. And this has happened over and over and over. But normally, it takes a soothsayer or a crystal ball reader to try and interpret those symbols and be able to see what it is predicting. In hindsight, it becomes clear that the images on the Economist magazine cover foretold the events that were to come. In this Economist magazine cover, however, it is not vague, it is very blatant. Notice the skulls on the sheaths of wheat. And in big bold letters, the coming food catastrophe. These are screenshots that I took today from this advertisement for the Epoch Times, which is a right-wing news outlet, that comes across my feed all the time. And in this particular advertisement, they're telling you that they are discussing and discovering and uncovering the truth behind all of these food processing plants catching on fire and burning to the ground. I watched a video just yesterday, I forget who it was, maybe BP Earthwatch or somebody, saying that the number is now up to 1,600 food processing plants that have burned to the ground in the last year to 18 months. It started in 2022. And that normally it's only about 4 or 5 stretched out over a few years. 1,600. And do you know what kind of fire they've burned down with? Plasma fire. In July of last year, I gave away $10,000 to $15,000 worth of food storage to a food pantry, and I gave them this magazine cover with the same general outline I just gave you, that the Economist magazine cover is famous for predicting the future. At the time, food processing plants had not begun to burn down, and their chicken, remember, eggs went up to like $10 a dozen or whatever they were. At the time, there were no indicators that were obvious to the average person regarding a coming food shortage.
Z, you sound like a dumbass. But they're just finding struggle because they don't have any actual important struggle in their lives. And that's why it only exists in the decadent West.
Do you think the coming famine will change that?
Absolutely. I would argue that when the famine comes, I think all these feminists will look for a strong man of resource who is stoic, who has a good network, who's capable and important and respected. It's amazing how quickly feminism disappears. In fact, there's a podcast I did called Fresh and Fit. And I did this podcast in Miami, and I was arguing about gender roles with 7 girls. And during it, they were telling me that they can do anything a man can do, all the usual things, and they don't care, they don't need a man, all this garbage. And some crazy fan knocked on the door for me, and he had a gun. He knocked on the door. You should have seen the women, how quickly they became feminists when I had to go to that door. They all completely changed. Go. Oh, the feminism's out the window. There's no feminists on the Titanic. There's no feminisms in a famine. There's no feminists at war. Where's